This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want Magic singles or sealed product, use my link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and with this video I'm continuing with my Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths set review. I've already looked at all the multicolored and colorless cards, and in this video I'm going to look at all the white and blue ones. For each of these cards, I'll discuss how I think they'll perform in Limited, that means draft and sealed, and I'll punctuate each evaluation with a letter grade. If you're new to my set reviews and unsure what my letter grades mean, you can find a guide in the description for this video. This is kind of a weird set since there are two different sets, Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths, in paper and on Arena, respectively, but the two are mechanically identical. I went deeper on this in the first video of the set review, but suffice it to say, I'm going to show both cards on the screen, but read the Spider-Man versions for each card. There are some other important things to keep in mind as I review these cards. First, because we're only talking about draft and sealed, I'm only going to be talking about cards that can be found in play boosters. This set has lots of supplementary products that have cards that won't be showing up in play boosters, like cards from the Eternal Legal set. So if there's a card that you think is missing from this video, it's probably not in play boosters. There is a bonus sheet in play boosters, but it's super rare with one card appearing in every 24 packs, so I'm going to address them in the last set review video. These are also, of course, my evaluations of these cards before it's possible to play this new limited format, because the goal is to have my set review done in time for the pre-release, and that means I'll be wrong about some things, but as the format comes into focus, I'll be doing videos where I discuss how things have panned out. Lastly, I want to let you know that there are some set review related perks for being a channel member or a patron. You get access to my ongoing set notes during preview season. It's kind of like a rough draft of my set review. And you'll also get a spreadsheet with all of my grades once a set review is complete. If those perks interest you, check out the description where you can find out how to support the channel using one of those methods. Alright, without further ado, let's dive in with a look at the white and blue cards in Spider-Man and Into the Omenpaths. First up, it's Anti-Venom Horrifying Healer, which costs 5 white mana for a 5/5 legendary symbiote hero at Mythic Rare. When it enters, if it was cast, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If damage would be dealt to Anti-Venom, prevent that damage and put that mini +1/+1 counters on him. 5 white mana is a big ask in Limited, even in a pick 2 format like this one, where it's probably going to be slightly more possible to go monocolored, since you can do a better job of stripping white cards out of packs. If Anti-Venom was like 3 generic and 2 white, it'd be an easy A+ since it generates a 2-for-1 up front and is a threat in its own right. But to play a card that costs 5 white, you pretty much do have to be mono white, and I just don't see that as being feasible often enough for this to be a great card in Limited. And I'm going to give it a D to reflect that fact, but if white is the most open color ever, he is going to be the best card in your deck. Next up, it's Arachne Psionic Weaver, which for 2 generic and a white is a 3/3 legendary spider-human hero at Rare. It has web slinging for 1 white, and this is an alternate casting cost you can pay instead if you also return a tapped creature you control to your hand. As Arachne enters, look at an opponent's hand, then choose a card type other than creature. Spells of the chosen type cost 1 generic more to cast. So this can slow an opponent down. You know, it's frequently going to be able to make 1 spell in their hand more expensive. And if that's like a removal spell, that feels pretty good. And being able to get her in play on the cheap while potentially getting some additional value is also quite nice. I think she's a B-. Next up, it's Aunt May, which for 1 white mana is a 0/2 legendary human citizen at uncommon. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. If it's a spider, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Unsurprisingly, this set has lots of spiders, and having a 1 mana 0/2 that will gain you life throughout the game anyway is pretty solid. Even getting 1 counter will make this card more than worth the investment, and getting more isn't going to be that challenging. I think she'll do a lot for 1 mana, giving her a C+. Next up, it's City Pigeon, which for 1 generic is a 1/1 bird at common. It's got flying, and when it leaves the battlefield, you make a food token. This looks like a nice common to me, and it's not just my bird bias that's making me think that. It can generate something pretty close to a 2-for-1, and the ceiling is way higher because of the web slinging mechanic. This makes a food regardless of how it leaves the battlefield, so returning this to cast something at a discount and generating a food every time you do sounds pretty good to me. Flying means that you can get it tapped pretty easily, get in for 1 damage. It just looks like a quality card that's going to have extra upside in some specific decks, giving it a C+. It's one of white's best commons. Next up, it's Costume Closet, which for 1 generic and a white is an uncommon artifact. It enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You can tap it to move a +1/+1 counter from it onto target creature you control, activate only as a sorcery. Whenever a modified creature you control leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on this artifact. We've seen very similar cards in the past and they have not performed well. The problem is having a card that doesn't do anything on its own and only getting one counter at a time for 2 mana just isn't that good. And sure, it can reload with counters when you have the right stuff die, like the other things you put counters on, but I'm still really underwhelmed here. You don't really want to spend turn 2 on this, nor is it an especially meaningful top deck late. It can give you some synergy in a +1/+1 counter or modified creatures deck, which are a thing, but I still don't think this is going to be anything close to like a premium card for that deck. In fact, I don't think it'll usually make the cut, giving it a D. Next up, it's Daily Bugle Reporters, which for 3 generic and a white is a 2/3 human citizen at common. When it enters, you choose one. You can put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, or you can return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So the first mode is the one that's going to be the most useful the most often, and you get a pretty good rate, especially because you can choose to put one of those counters on this creature. But I also like that you have access to another mode, because when there is something really good worth getting back, that feels good too, and you do generate a 2-for-1. Either way, this looks like it's going to generate significant value when you cast it. I mean, it's not going to feel good if this is your only creature, because then it's a 4 mana 3/4, but that's not going to happen that often. I think it's a C+. Next up, it's Flash Thompson's Spider Fan, which for 1 generic and a white is a 2/2 human citizen and uncommon. It's got flash, and when it enters, you choose one or both. You can tap target creature or untap target creature. They had to give him flash, didn't they? He looks solid. Getting both triggers is pretty doable and can definitely deter your opponent from attacking, or you can use him in more of an ambush situation so that you can sabotage an opponent's attack by untapping something, and sometimes you can use tap target creature to help you set up web slinging without having to attack with something, but overall he's nothing special. He's just a solid 2-drop. It seems like his abilities are really flexible, but I think in practice you'll find that they aren't that meaningful often enough for him to be anything more than a C. Next up, it's Friendly Neighborhood, which for 3 generic and a white is a rare enchantment aura with enchant land. When it enters, you create 3 1/1 green and white human citizen creature tokens, and the enchanted land has 1 generic tap. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. 4 mana to make 3 1/1s is often a playable limited card, and this has tons of upside beyond that. Making your land into something that makes one of your creatures a must-block threat every turn, and if it has evasion or trample or something, they can't even block it a lot of the time, is pretty awesome. Honestly, I'm pretty close to giving this a bomb grade because it gives you so much up front and then has an ability that's going to be in play virtually every turn. But I think I'm only willing to go as high as a B+. Next up, it's Origin of Spider-Man, which for 1 generic and a white is a rare enchantment saga. Chapter 1 gives you a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach. Chapter 2 puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it becomes a legendary spider hero in addition to its other types. And Chapter 3 gives target creature you control double strike until end of turn. This gives you a ton of value for the cost. The floor is a 2 mana 2/1 with reach. That card wouldn't be great, but it would make the cut sometimes when you need a 2-drop, especially with a useful creature type. Chapter 2 and 3 are very likely to give you some sweet additional value too. As with mini sagas, you just get an insane amount for the investment, even if you do have to wait a little bit longer to get full value. And this is super efficient. All the chapters have a meaningful impact on the turn when they happen, and it's hard not to be really excited about that, giving it an A-. Next up, it's Peter Parker, which for 1 generic and a white is a 0/1 legendary creature human scientist hero at Mythic Rare. When he enters, you create a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach, and it has an activated ability that costs 1 generic, a green, a white, and a blue, and you can transform Peter Parker, activate only as a sorcery. It's also a modal double-faced card, so it's a card that can transform, but also a modal double-faced card. In other words, you can choose to cast either side of this from your hand, so that's modality right there. So you can cast this as Amazing Spider-Man, which has the same casting cost as that transform effect. 1 generic, a green, a white, and a blue. It's a 4/4 legendary spider-human hero with vigilance and reach, and each legendary spell you cast that's 1 or more colors has web slinging for green, white, and blue. So 2 mana for a 0/1 that makes a 2/1 spider is a card that would easily make the cut. It's probably like a C+, so the fact that you can transform this or cast it as a more relevant creature is great, and this set has enough legendary creatures that being able to pay the alternate cost is going to come up sometimes. It is a bummer you can't return Amazing Spider-Man for its own web slinging effect because it has vigilance, so you have to get creative to get it tapped. Because when you do that, you can cast it as Peter Parker again, get the spider, and then transform it again, and that's just a lot of value that you can get over the long run. But you can't do that most of the time. But you still have a card that's great because it's modal to begin with. Like, I'd be happy with this card if it couldn't transform into the other side, if I only had an option between either side. And then each side individually is probably a card I'd play. I mean, Amazing Spider-Man is a little hard to cast in a set that's mostly focused on 2 color combinations, but Fixing's pretty good, so you'd probably play it in a lot of decks. But obviously it's even better than all of that because you can cast it as either side and transform Peter Parker into the Amazing Spider-Man later in the game. It just looks really good. I don't quite think Amazing Spider-Man is so, well, amazing that the card ends up quite being in the bomb range though, because you're not always going to be able to use that ability. So I think it's a B+, which is still pretty good. Next up, it's Rent is Due, which is 1 red mana for a rare enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you may tap 2 untapped creatures and or treasures you control. If you do, draw a card. Otherwise, sacrifice this enchantment. It takes some work to be sure, but this can be a 1-mana enchantment that draws you a card every turn. Problem is, you can't always tap your stuff, and because you only draw the card at the end step, you can't normally count on the extra card you draw, making up for the fact that you've tapped 2 things down. And this just giving itself up when you can't pay, while flavorful, is brutal. It means you can't run this out early very often, and it'll basically only be good if you're at parity with your opponent most of the time. It does get better with Treasure, and there are a few, but they also aren't a massive theme in this set, so I'm pretty skeptical of this overall. It's weird enough that it's the kind of card I wouldn't be shocked if I was wrong about, because if this turns out to be a 1-mana value engine consistently, it's going to be great, but for now I think it's just a D. Next up, it's Selfless Police Captain, which for 1 generic and a white is a 1/1 human detective at common. It enters with a +1/+1 counter, and when it leaves the battlefield, you put its +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. We've seen a card like this several times at this point, and they're always serviceable 2-drops, but not great ones. You'd be surprised how infrequently you can actually pile counters on this and get a ton of value out of this dying. It is nice that it's a ready-made modified creature, like it comes into play modified, and that matters in this set, but I still think it's just a C. Next up, it's Silver Sable Mercenary Leader, who for 2 generic and a white is a 2/3 legendary human mercenary hero at uncommon. When it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature, and when it attacks, target modified creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. I'm already in on this card with just the interest trigger, and that's good, because her other ability is a little harder to get going. She isn't going to survive many attacks, and unless you have a trade or your opponent can't block at all, it won't always be worth attacking for lifelink. Notably, if you modify her, she can give herself lifelink, but she can't modify herself with her enters trigger. But yeah, point is, 3 mana, 2/3, put a counter somewhere is already a really good rate, and this has upside, giving it a B-. Next up, it's Spectacular Spider-Man, which for 1 generic and a white is a 3/2 legendary spider-human hero at rare. It's got Flash. You can pay 1 generic to have it gain flying until end of turn, and you can pay 1 generic and sacrifice it to give creatures you control hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is an awesome 2-drop. It has good stats, stays relevant all game thanks to flying, and can even protect your entire board. And because of Flash, it can do that last part out of nowhere. Basically, it's a great aggressive creature with an ability to pressure your opponent all game long, and it has some amazing added utility beyond that. I'm giving it a B+, and an A- isn't out of the realm of possibility. Next up, it's Spectacular Tactics, which for 1 generic and a white is a common instant. Choose one, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. This is going to be pretty good. The first mode is a trick that's basically always worth playing since it can blank removal and give a permanent buff that can help a creature win combat. And the second mode is also usually a card that makes the cut. Sure, it's restricted, but most opponents have enough targets for a 2-mana removal spell that virtually always trades up to be pretty good. Basically, this is like 2 C's stapled together, and I think that makes it a C+, and a B- wouldn't shock me. Next up, it's Spider-Man Web-Slinger, which for 2 generic and a white is a 3/3 legendary spider-human hero at common. It has web-slinging for 1 white. A 3-mana 3/3 is not very good these days. That's like a D. You need your cards to do more. But you can cast this for a lot less, and when you can do that and return something that can generate some additional value, like that pigeon, you're going to be really happy. This is still probably just a C because the floor is bad and you won't always be able to reach the ceiling here. Next up, it's Spider UK, which for 3 generic and a white is a 3/4 legendary spider-human hero at uncommon. It has web-slinging for 2 generic and a white. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more creatures enter the battlefield under your control this turn, you draw a card and gain 2 life. This is a good instep trigger that pays you off in a big way for going wide, and web slinging is a mechanic that can help you set that up in the first place, since you can bounce something to your hand, cast Spider UK, then recast the creature you bounced. It's far from automatic, but it's also not insane to imagine triggering this like once a game, and if you trigger it once a game, you're going to be happy, giving it a C+. Next up, it's Starling Aerial Ally, which for 4 generic and a white is a 3/4 legendary human hero. At common, it's got flying, and when it enters, another target creature you control gains flying until end of turn. 5-mana 3/4 flyers play reasonably well when they have some other stuff going on, and this enters trigger is something else going on, but it's not always meaningful. Like, there just aren't always boards where you can take advantage of giving your creature flying, and when you can't, it's going to feel pretty bad. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Sudden Strike, which for 1 generic and a white is an uncommon instant. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature. We've seen a lot of these effects perform really well lately. Sure, they're situational, but the situation they're good in just happens, and paying 2 mana to destroy something is incredibly efficient, and it can even produce blowouts if your opponent isn't careful. There was a time where it felt like this kind of removal that is this situational couldn't really be premium, but I feel like that's changed over the last couple of years, where basically all of these like white, destroy, tapped, or attacking or blocking thing for cheap has performed pretty well, and I think this will. I'm giving it a B-. Next up, it's Thwip, which for 1 white mana is a common instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. If it's a spider, you gain 2 life. This is a solid trick with upside that can sometimes win you the game late by sending something big to the sky. The buff is enough to win mini combats on the cheap, and you're going to gain life a decent chunk of the time too. It's a C. Next up, it's Web Up, which for 2 generic and a white is a common enchantment. When it enters, you exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So this is Banishing Light, and that's always a solid to good removal spell in Limited. It can be a little clunky since it's always sorcery speed, and sometimes you have to trade down, but it can also hit just about anything at a reasonable rate. It always hovers from C+ to B- depending on the format. For now, I'm going to assume it's in the higher range. I'm giving it a B-. Next up, it's Web Shooters, which for 1 generic and a white is an uncommon artifact equipment. A quick creature gets +1/+1 and has reach, and whenever this creature attacks, tap target creature and opponent controls, and it equips for 2 generic. We saw a very similar card to this recently, Thunder Lasso, and it was bad. This is 1 mana cheaper to cast, but the Lasso also equipped once for free. It's just not usually worth the card or 4 total mana to get this buff, even if it is nice to get blockers out of the way sometimes. It's usually better to just play another creature than it is this card. I'm giving it a D. Next up, it's Wild Pack Squad, which for 2 generic and a white is a 2/3 human mercenary at common. At the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target creature gains first strike and vigilance until end of turn. This can do something the turn it comes down, and usually one of those keywords matters a little bit, and getting both at the same time is nice. First strike makes it hard for your creature to be blocked, while vigilance can allow you to make attacks that you couldn't make before because you don't have to open yourself up enough. It can also buff itself, which matters on subsequent turns. I think it's a C. And our last white card is With Great Power, which for 3 generic and a white is a rare enchantment aura with enchant creature you control. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each aura and equipment attached to it. All damage that would be dealt to you is dealt to enchanted creature instead. So this gives +2/+2 for 4 on its own, which isn't great. And getting more than that, while doable, isn't going to be easy either. The damage redirection effect does make things interesting, as it can lead to you not needing to worry at all about damage dealt to you. That said, just having this act as like a fog that can redirect damage, but you end up getting 2 for 1 isn't very good. What you need for this to be good is to set up a situation where your creature is really big, and you can just let damage through when it's lower than the creature's toughness. Then you prevent damage and keep your creature around, but that's going to be too hard and limited most of the time. Even if this aura does help a little by buffing the creature, it still presents a massive risk of a 2 for 1, and it's a little too fiddly to line up well. I think it's an F. Alright, let's move to blue now. Our first blue card is Amazing Acrobatics, which for 1 generic and 2 blue is a common instant. Choose one or both, counter target spell, or tap 1 or 2 target creatures. Cancel is not very good in most formats. Having to leave up 3 mana, 2 of which has to be blue, is tough and limited, and it's only ever a 1 for 1 trade, and only if you have your mana up at the right time. The tapping stuff is upside, but it's also pretty situational, although it does mean you can use this even when there isn't a spell to counter, and sometimes the other mode can be good. Cancel is usually like a D+, and I think the extra mode does enough to push it to C-, but that still means it's a blue card that just won't always make the cut. Next up, it's Beetle Legacy Criminal, which for 3 generic and a blue is a 3/3 legendary human rogue villain at common. It's got flying, and you can pay 1 generic and a blue and exile it from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Gains flying until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. 4 mana 3/3 flyers that don't have some other inherent form of value when they enter don't play super well in limited. It dies too easily to really cheap removal, and lots of 2-drops can just attack into it these days. This one tries to make back a little from the graveyard, and that helps, but you don't really get a card of value then either. So I feel like you're not going to be very excited about this either way. It's almost better to mill this and get the other effect than it is to spend the 4 mana on it in the first place. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Chameleon, Master of Disguise, which for 3 generic and a blue is a 2/3 legendary human shapeshifter villain at uncommon. You can have it enter as a copy of a creature you control, except his name is Chameleon, Master of Disguise, and it has Mayhem for 2 generic and a blue. This effect basically gives the card flashback, but only if you discarded it and only during that turn when you discarded it. So you want to discard this to connive, as it'll always be the best creature you control, and spending 3 mana means you're going to get a good deal most of the time. Paying 4 is a little harder to stomach, but at least, unlike a lot of clones, they made this one a 2/3 when it has nothing to copy, and that's a somewhat relevant body and keeps it from being like completely horrendous on an empty board. Having that kind of reasonable fail case helps this card for sure, and I think it'll be easy to set up with Mayhem and get good value, so I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's the Clone Saga, which for 3 generic and a blue is a rare enchantment saga. Chapter 1 surveils 3. Chapter 2 says when you next cast a creature spell this turn, copy it, except the copy isn't legendary. And Chapter 3 says choose a card name. Whenever a creature with a chosen name deals combat damage to a player this turn, draw a card. So I don't love that this doesn't do something to the board right away, but the surveil does basically guarantee that you can set up Chapter 2. Whatever creature you cast will give you a 2-for-1 on that next turn. While Chapter 3 won't always draw you 2 cards, I do think drawing 1 with it is kind of realistic since you'll have 2 copies, and even if you've drawn 0, you've likely already gotten a pretty good deal out of this saga. I think it's a B. Next up, it's Doc Ock, Sinister Scientist, which for 4 generic and a blue is a 4/5 legendary human scientist villain at common. If there are 8 or more cards in your graveyard, he has base power and toughness 8/8, and as long as you control another villain, Doc Ock has hexproof. A 5 mana 4/5 isn't great, but this will have hexproof a reasonable chunk of the time in blue, especially in blue-black, and blue-black is also good at loading the graveyard, so it's not out of the question that he's a 5 mana 8/8 with hexproof, and yes, he's a common. It does take setup for both of those things to happen, and making those things happen isn't the easiest thing ever, but it does mean that this has like a ton of upside that is reasonably accessible, and then it has like an almost passable baseline. So I think he ends up being a C+. Like, he's the top curve, the 5 mana card you're really going to want in a lot of blue-black decks, especially in the format. Next up, it's Doc Ock's Henchman, which for 2 generic and a blue is a 2/1 human villain at common with flash. When it attacks, it connives. It means you draw a card, then discard a card, and if you discard a non-land, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Connive is good, but a 3 mana 2/1 with flash isn't. Sure, it can become a 3/2 and help you loot, and it will be a worthwhile attack anytime you can at least trade, but this isn't going to be around to connive enough to be that good. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Flying Octobot, which for 1 generic and a blue is a 1/1 robot villain at uncommon. It's an artifact creature. It has flying, and whenever another villain you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This ability triggers only once each turn. A 2 mana 1/1 flyer is bad, but this set has lots of villains, as you've already seen just in this video, and putting even 1 counter on this feels good, and it's not unlikely that it gets even bigger, and when you spend 2 mana on a creature that becomes like a legit mid to late game threat, that feels pretty good. Giving it a C+. Next up, it's Hide on the Ceiling, which for X and a blue is a rare instant. Exile X target artifacts and or creatures. Return the exiled cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. These are always pretty hard to set up in limited. Like, they're flexible, and I think that tricks people sometimes because you can think of a long list of situations where this is good. You can get your opponent's blockers out of the way. You can save your creatures from removal. You can rebuy interest triggers. But those things are each individually only available to you in a meaningful way a small percentage of the time. So yes, it sounds flexible, but in like a normal situation where the thing you want to do is, I don't know, fully remove a creature or play a creature on your side of the battlefield, which is generally what you want to spend your turn doing in limited most of the time. It's just not good in those situations. You have to have the right board and the right situation for it to line up correctly, and that keeps it from being very good in limited. I think it's a D. Next up, it's Hydro-Man Fluid Felon, which for 2 blue mana is a 2/2 legendary elemental villain at rare. Whenever you cast a blue spell, if Hydro-Man is a creature, he gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And at the beginning of your end step, untap Hydro-Man. Until your next turn, he becomes a land and gains tap, add blue. He's not a creature during this time. This is a cool design. Basically, he's a creature on your turn, one that can grow. He sort of has blue prowess, but he turns into mana on your opponent's turn. This makes him hard to kill with some kinds of removal and also means he can't block, but also means he kind of ramps your mana for instant speed stuff. So he's not like a scary threat, and there are some downsides here, but I think with the upsides, it's kind of a wash. Oh, I think he's just a C. Next up, it's Imposter Syndrome, which for 4 generic and 2 blue is a mythic rare enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. So this is a 6 mana card that needs an extra step to actually do something, and that is a bad starting point. Sure, if you're ahead and able to get a creature in for combat damage, you're going to be excited about things. But if you're at parity or behind, this is not going to feel good. Basically, this very much looks like a win more card. It gets a little better if you have a significant amount of evasion, but on the whole, this just puts you super far behind when you really need something to help you break parity or get to parity. It's not going to do either of those things, so I think it's a D. Next up, it's Lady Octopus, Inspired Inventor. For 1 blue mana, she's a 0/2 legendary human scientist villain at rare. Whenever you draw your first or second card each turn, put an Ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus, and you can tap her and cast an artifact spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the number of Ingenuity counters on Lady Octopus without paying its mana cost. She does trigger a ton, at least once per each of your draw steps, and sometimes she'll trigger twice a turn, but she still feels too slow and too particular to be a worthwhile card in limited. I mean, you need an artifact with a mana value lower than the number of her counters, and you need her to stick around long enough to get those counters, and in the meantime, she's an absolute liability in every other way. So even though she's super cheap and can give you a discount, I don't see her working in limited. Discounts themselves aren't that powerful in limited. Like, if she let you draw a card or something, that would be way, way better, and not just because she synergizes with herself. But drawing a random card on average in limited is going to be better than putting an artifact that's already in your hand that you can probably cast anyway onto the battlefield for free. You can do it at instant speed, which is a thing, but overall, she just seems like a liability who's not really going to be worth the card most of the time, giving her an F. Next up, it's Madam Web, Clairvoyant, which for 4 generic and 2 blue is a 4/4 legendary mutant advisor at uncommon. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast spider spells and non-creature spells from the top of your library. Whenever you attack, you can mill a card. So she can be an incredible value engine, probably capable of letting you cast like a quarter of your deck off the top, and her mill trigger can help make that easier. So the text box, it's great. But the stat line is brutal. 6 mana 4/4s, even ones that draw you cards, haven't fared well of late, especially when you have to wait a turn to start getting something out of her. In the meantime, your opponent can just attack right into her understated body with their much larger creatures, and that's a problem, especially when you aren't even guaranteed a card on your next turn. I think she's a C at best. Next up, it's Mysterio, Master of Illusion, who for 3 generic and a blue is a 3/3 legendary human villain at rare. When he enters, you create a 3/3 blue illusion villain creature token for each non-token villain you control. Exile those tokens when Mysterio leaves the battlefield. He counts himself, so that means you pay 4 mana for 2 3/3s. That's a great deal, and yeah, it is true that his tokens aren't quite as valuable as most, since if he goes down, they're all going down too. But you still get 2 bodies out of the deal, and finding a way to cash those in for value before Mysterio dies, like trading them, attacking with them, and forcing blocks, or sacrificing them, helps offset the downside, which honestly isn't really that big of a downside anyway. His tokens just aren't completely broken, but you're never going to get blown out, and the ceiling here is really, really high. If your opponent doesn't have removal, they're probably just dead. So I think he's an A-. He doesn't quite get higher into the bomb range because your opponent can still find a reasonably decent way to get a 1-for-1 against him, but he is really strong. Next up, it's Mysterio's Phantasm, which for 1 generic and a blue is a 1/3 illusion villain at common. It's got flying and vigilance, and when it attacks, you mill a card. A 2 mana 1/3 with flying and vigilance is actually kind of nice, although It is a little weird in this set because it doesn't work with web slinging, but still, it plays offense and defense well in the early game while loading the graveyard for you. It's going to be a quality 2-drop in blue decks. I'm starting it at a C, and in like a really graveyard-centric deck, it's probably more like a C+. Next up, we've got Norman Osborn, which for 1 generic and a blue, is a 1/1 legendary human scientist villain at Mythic Rare. He can't be blocked. When he deals combat damage to a player, he connives, and he's a double-faced card like Peter Parker we saw earlier. You can pay 1 generic, a blue, a black, and a red, and transform Norman Osborn, activate only as a sorcery. You can also, because it's a modal double-faced card, also cast it as Green Goblin from your hand for 1 generic, a blue, a black, and a red. And Green Goblin is a 3/3 legendary goblin human villain with flying and menace. Spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 generic less to cast, and each non-land card in your graveyard has Mayhem. The Mayhem cost is equal to its mana cost. This is really good. I'm already super excited about the front of this card. An unblockable 2-mana 1/1 who connives when it hits. That's amazing. It will generate tons of value over the course of the game and get larger too. Then you can also cast this as a very hard to block flyer that can make all of your discards way more valuable thanks to Mayhem. Though it's a little sad he no longer has a built-in way to connive, but that would probably be absurd. In an ideal world, you probably cast him as Norman Osborn early, get some counters on him, and then transform it into Green Goblin, who can then really take advantage of those counters. Although again, like the front side being unblockable is also a pretty good way to take advantage of those counters. But like, I think both sides of this are individually would be like a B+ at worst. And having access to both, having the modality, having the ability to transform, all of that makes this a really big bomb. I'm giving it an A. Next up, it's Oscorp Research Team, which for 3 generic and a blue is a 1/5 human scientist at common. He can pay 6 generic and a blue to draw 2 cards. I like this kind of card, but that doesn't mean it's good. It's super defensive and has a nice late game mana sink, but it's going to be pretty underwhelming when you play it on 4, and you have to wait 3 turns to get to the activated ability, which you often just won't have time to use, so I think it's a C-. Next up, it's Robotics Mastery, which for 4 generic and a blue is an uncommon enchantment aura with flash and enchant creature. When it enters, you create 2 1/1 colorless robot artifact creature tokens with flying. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Auras that add something else to the board while offering a buff tend to fare pretty well. That's because even if your opponent eventually removes the creature you've put this on, you still have something left over. In this case, 2 evasive bodies, which are definitely relevant most of the time, and like 2 1/1 flyers themselves is probably worth a little more than a card. You still can't really cast this when an opponent might have interaction, because you do get blown out if you can't put this on your creature. But Flash does make it easier to find a window, and easier for you to find a blowout by using this as a trick. So I think this is really good. I'm giving it a B. Next up, it's School Days, which for 3 generic and 2 blue is an uncommon instant. Choose one, draw 3 cards, or counter target spell, draw a card. It's a little expensive, but it delivers some very real value. Drawing 3 for 5 at instant speed is solid in most formats, and countering a spell and drawing a card can be devastating. You probably don't want too many of these since they are expensive and situational, but I think the first one's like a C+. Next up, it's Secret Identity, which for 1 blue mana is an uncommon instant. It says choose one. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a citizen with base power and toughness 1/1 and gains hexproof. You can also choose to have target creature you control become a hero with base power and toughness 3/4 and gain flying and vigilance. This is really cheap and offers 2 pretty good effects. The first mode lets you blink removal. That's great. Bad news is that it also shrinks your creature. So it isn't the kind of thing that lets you blink removal and win combat at the same time. We've seen that lately with tricks that give like indestructible and +1/+1. This isn't one of those. So you don't really want to send your creature into combat and use it. You more just want to use it in response to removal that's just being cast normally, not in the middle of combat. The other mode can be sort of a combat trick because it buffs the creature into a 3/4 with flying and vigilance. It is an effect that has diminishing returns the larger your creature started out as, like paying 1 mana to give something +1/+1 in flying and vigilance. Not great, right? So, and that's what you'd be doing with like a 2/3. But it does have this combat trick upside and this blink removal upside. I kind of wish it could do both at the same time, like a lot of the best tricks we've seen lately. This isn't quite there, but I do think it's solid because it's so cheap, giving it a C. Next up, it's Spider Bite, Web Warden, which for 2 generic and a blue is a 2/2 legendary spider avatar hero at uncommon. When it enters, return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It's hard to imagine this won't be blue's best uncommon, as it's strictly better mana war. It's always going to add to the board and subtract from your opponents, and it also has the potential to bounce your own stuff when that's worthwhile. Returning this with web slinging and then casting it again is also really nasty. Giving this a B. Next up, it's Spider-Man No More, which for 1 generic and a blue is an enchantment aura with enchant creature. Enchanted creature is a citizen with base power and toughness 1/1. It has defender and loses all other abilities. This type of removal, when it costs more than 1 mana and doesn't have any special synergy in the set, isn't great. This does add defender, unlike most iterations of this effect, but blocking is actually probably the most obnoxious thing about a creature that you put this on. You spend 2 mana and a card on this, and when your opponent uses their creature to chump block, that ultimately means you're getting back part of a card worth of value. It does answer most things fairly cleanly, but it doesn't ever do it entirely, so it's hard to go above a C here. Next up, it's Spider Sense, which for 1 generic and a blue is a rare instant with web slinging for 1 blue, counter target instant spell, sorcery spell, or triggered ability. Cool design, but this isn't here for limited. It's too narrow at countering spells to be worthwhile, and countering abilities is even more worthless in limited, as you often go down a card and don't even get a full card of value. It's an F. Next up, it's Unstable Experiment, which for 1 generic and a blue is a common instant. Target player draws a card, then up to 1 target creature you control connives. This looks like a good deal to me. Sure, 2 mana to draw 1 isn't good, but 2 mana to draw 1 and then loot, and then maybe get a +1/+1 counter on a creature definitely is. It gives this card some potential, albeit inconsistently, as a combat trick, and dumps 2 cards in your graveyard while generating value. All of that looks pretty good here. I'm giving this a C+. And our last blue card, and the last card in this particular video, is Whoosh, which for 1 generic and a blue is a common instant with kicker for 1 generic and a blue. That means you can pay that additional cost as you cast it. It returns target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and if it was kicked, you draw a card. This is a card we've seen a couple of different times with different names, like Blink of an Eye, and it's pretty good. Just casting it as a 2 mana bounce spell isn't amazing, but it is a mode you have access to without having to leave a whole lot of mana up, and kicking it feels pretty good since you get a card back while still bouncing something. I'm giving this a C+. So those are all the white and blue cards in Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths. In the next video, I'll look at the black and red cards. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos in this set review, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the set review videos that are already out there, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.